suspect you're going to turn them all on when we get that one.
Yeah, I didn't have any wine today.
There you go. Yes, yes. That one.
I'm actually taking those same pills. Well, probably not the same ones, but both.
All right.
I've got the Lipitor knockoff with a generic. Plus, my cardiologist has me taking another one to give a super duper effect. And
I can do something with my cage. And so tomorrow,
well, he has not warned me off of alcohol, so I'm not going to ask him anything. Owen.
Good evening, everyone. Can we find our seats, please? Oh, it's so good to see you. All these old friends and new acquaintances. Fantastic to see you in this beautiful, beautiful place in Las Cruces. It's only appropriate to have an astronomy meeting under dark skies. And this is one of the few places in continental US that has real dark skies. And it's beautiful and clear outside, so I hope that you will get out with your binoculars and enjoy it. Tonight we're kicking off our meeting with a very, very special presentation. And this is actually pretty much to celebrate the 50-year anniversary from Apollo 11. How many of you remember that? Yeah. So if not anything else, if not anything else, it's showcasing what the human mind can actually do once we put it, in our minds. We are a very stubborn species, so we can actually travel all the way to the moon and further out. About 600 million people actually watched the first people actually walking on the moon 50 years ago. And I'm pretty sure there were lots of things that were happening behind the scenes that we didn't know. So we're very, very fortunate today to have one of those individuals who were behind the scenes to actually give us his perspective and his experiences, share a little bit of his experience. For some of us who were not there to actually witness that, this presentation will be literally a travel in time. And I'm really looking forward to it. It could be like a blast from the past sort of thing. So let me introduce today's speaker, who is our president, Gordon Myers. He was raised in New York, Connecticut, and Ohio. So you were raised in 3 different states. We have to talk about that. After graduating from Caltech and the University of New Mexico, he joined IBM working on the Apollo space program. He later managed the organization that developed the flight software for the space shuttle, receiving NASA's Public Service Award for his work. In the 1990s, he was vice president and general manager of IBM's Global Service Organization. Since retiring, he's worked on nonprofit organizations focused on education and astronomy. And with that, it's all yours.
Thank you.
Let's welcome Gordon Myers.
Well, it's good to be here tonight. It is a little hard for me to think back 50 years, but it sounds like a lot of you also were there at the time, got a chance to see this. So what I want to do is talk a little bit, not just about what went on behind the scenes, although I think those may be the most interesting stories, but before I get to that, I want to take us back to the 1950s for 5 or 10 minutes and talk about why we went to the moon. Because I think it's sometimes hard to realize what it was like when the Sputnik era hit us and what the reaction was in the United States. You can see some familiar people up there that this audience will recognize. You can see an old TV set, although that one was actually color. We didn't have color in my house in the 50s. We were lucky to have a black and white about 1953 or 1954. But think about what was going on in the world back then. I mean, the generation, our parents, they'd come through World War II. War was not somebody else's war, it was their war. They had all participated in one way or another in that war. There was a real, I think, understanding of the horrors of war. And on top of that, things were settling, but the Cold War with the Soviet Union had just really exploded. And this whole communism versus democracy and which is the best way to run a government, all of that was just common discussion. And then there was this other thing going on that we sometimes forget. And I've got 2 quick videos to remind us of what it was like back then. One was nuclear weapons. We were still doing above ground testing. And the other was getting ready for surviving a nuclear attack. And when you see the video on that, it will both be a little humorous and yet almost a little sad also. Those were roughly a mile away, right? So on the one hand, we're being showed the destructive power of the nuclear weapons, and then this is what we were seeing on TV.
Duck and cover. Paul and Patty know this. No matter where they go or what they do, they always try to remember what to do if the atom bomb explodes right there. It's a bomb, duck and cover. Sundays, holidays, vacation time, we must be ready every day, all the time, to do the right thing if the atomic bomb explodes. Duck and cover. And that's the first thing to do. Duck and cover. First thing, you duck, duck, and cover. You duck and cover. Tight, duck and cover under the tape.
So, the fear of war and nuclear war was real, and this was a constant tension within our society, something that I know my parents talked about all the time. I imagine some of you were in the same situation. But there were some good things going on too. The United Nations in 1956-57 was trying to bring together the scientists from around the world to work together on a united project, and that was called the International Geophysical Year. Now, I must tell you, as an astronomer, I've always wondered how the geophysical year ended up being 18 months long, but I decided not to worry about that. We were certain, we, the United States, were absolutely certain we were going to be the first nation to launch a satellite in space. That is the Vanguard, which you can see on the right. In the lower there, you see the engineers loading the original Vanguard satellite into the top of one of the launch vehicles. And I have a book, actually. It's called Vanguard. It was published in early 1957. And it starts with basically a set of words saying, later next year, we are going to set history by launching the first satellite around the Earth. And it was the assumption that we had that we were by far the most advanced nation with the most advanced technology was really pretty phenomenal. And that was our attitude. I mean, as a kid, I was 13 years old when the Sputnik was launched. And I was just stunned. I mean, I can still remember that day. This was the Time magazine, the Life magazine article. I thought the writer picked a great caption, "The feet that shook the earth," because I think it really did. But I don't think many of you remember. I literally remember the day because my brother's high school football team had just lost to our near neighbors next door. I was sitting in bed. I don't know what, 13-year-olds, what do you do? I was listening to music on the radio, and suddenly it was interrupted, and it said the Soviets had launched a satellite. And I remember just kind of like,